Hi everyone, this is Courtney from Ruby Red Farm. Today I'm going to be taking you through how to repot your seedlings. So if you finally made that leap, you've started some seeds and they're starting to outgrow their home, it's probably time to go ahead and step them up to the next size of pot. In our case, I prefer to use these really nice 4-inch pots. I bought these in bulk on Amazon and I'll put the link below for you guys, but really any pot will do. The nice thing with these is we can reuse them from year to year, and I'm a huge fan of trying to recycle and reuse things whenever possible. So let me show you the general process of how we get from what feels like step 1 to step 2 of growing your own vegetables. So these here are our cabbage seeds, and while it may not seem possible, we planted these just 4 weeks ago, and this is already how big they are. They have very much outgrown their space. I would have moved them about a week ago, but we had some things come up. They've been fine in here, but they're certainly ready for some new real estate. So the first step that I like to do before moving these plants is I do like to give them a little bit of a watering, okay? So I've watered these plants every 2 to 3 days. I want to make sure that this dirt is damp so that when I'm removing the plants, I'm not having dirt break off into pieces and risk compromising the roots. Again, just a sprinkle. These guys have been pretty well hydrated throughout this whole process, but that way I know that dirt's not going anywhere. To prepare my soil, I'm simply using a little bit of soil from our actual garden, as well as an organic potting mix that I purchased from the store. I do like to get the potting mix nice and wet, get it a little bit damp before I apply it into the cups, because potting soil naturally repels water. And so you can imagine what could go wrong then if I'm putting something that repels water in a plant that requires water. A lot of times the water will simply float off and take a lot of the dirt with it if you're not careful. So again, I like to get it nice and damp before I do this process. The next step then is to remove these seedlings from their individual pods. To do that, I'm going to be taking the bottom portion here, giving it a little squeeze in every direction just to free up the dirt, but also free up any roots that have overgrown. I'm going to grab the plant at the base, and while providing a little pressure from underneath, I'm simply pulling up. And if it's well watered, I should get a pretty whole item here as opposed to bits and pieces. Now, I'm going to be moving this into, again, this 4-inch pot. However, because these roots spent just a little bit too long in their smaller home, I personally always like to tear a few of them free. Reason for this is that by causing a little bit of damage, I'm actually stimulating more root growth for when this plant goes into its new dirt. If I don't do that, it runs the risk of continuing to grow only in the very small amount of dirt that it already had. To switch this plant to its new pot, I'm going to take a little bit of my prepared soil. So once I have just really a small amount on the base here to kind of catch this plant, I'm going to pat it down slightly, put my new plant in while still holding it up to make sure that it doesn't fall over. Once it's in, then I'm going to be going through and putting dirt around the plant to support it. Now, in the case of this plant, this is a cabbage plant. The seedling, again, is about 4 weeks old. With certain plants, you want to bury them deep. With a cabbage plant, though, that is simply not necessary. You simply want to make it even with the level that it was at before. Tomatoes, for example, you want to bury them deep. We don't do that with cabbages, though. So this is the final product. This plant has now been moved to a much more spacious home so that it can grow and start really working on producing cabbages, which is its ultimate goal. Now, copy and paste. If only it were that easy. Of course, during this process, you do want to be very careful not to damage the plant. In this phase of life, they are very, very delicate. There are certain plants, in fact, that it's not recommended that you start indoors, so make sure you do your homework. With a cabbage plant, perfectly fine to start it indoors because of how long they take to grow, and they are a relatively sturdy plant, but these leaves and branches are very, very fragile at this phase and will break with any bump or oops. Just know that it does happen. And if and when you break one of your baby plants, do not be too upset with yourselves. That's why you started so many seeds to begin with. There will be some losses in the process. Don't beat yourself up about it too much. Yep, see, my first casualty. This leaf broke. We'll give it a try. It'll probably die though, and we'll just trim it off. One last thing to mention as I'm putting these plants together here is that I am putting quite a bit of downward pressure once I have things in place. Of course, this dirt is going to compact once you get water on it and once it's had some time to settle. So to prevent having these giant divots in the dirt height on the edges, I'm making sure I'm pressing pretty firmly to find any of those cave-ins and try to then backfill so that you have an even surface again to have nice spacious areas for the roots to be able to grow into. All right, now that the first 10 are done, let me go through and show you how I label these and get them set up to continue growing until they're ready to start hardening off outside. So now that I have 10 different plants into their home, this is kind of where these plants will stay until I'm ready to put them outside. So this will be their last repotting. Once I have them in, every year I lovingly tell myself, I can tell what kind of plant this is. And then every year I end up forgetting what kind of plant this is and when I planted it, and I'm in a little bit of a pickle. So I'm trying this year to be a little more on top of it, and I will use the sophisticated labeling system of writing what kind of plant it is on the pot, which might not seem like that novel of a concept, but apparently it was for me. So all I do normally is I'm gonna go through, write a C on each one for cabbage. Thankfully, I don't start any other plants that start with a C. And then I usually do like to put the date on here, more for my own learning, because I do not know how long these plants really take to mature. Today is February 4th, I believe. And so I'll put that on at least a few of the plants that are on this tray. I'll probably put a C on all of them just in case they get swapped out as we go through, mixed up with broccoli and lettuce, for example, depending on the different plants' ages. But in general, once I have labeled each of these, they will be going back to our indoor greenhouse, which has those grow lights. We will continue watering them every 2 to 3 days. It is important to make sure you're not over-watering the seedlings at this stage, because at this phase, you actually want to err on the side of letting them be a little bit dry because it makes them grow more roots. That's another reason why bottom watering is so helpful at this stage, where I can take this tray with no holes in it and I can fill water directly into the tray to make that plant reach downwards with its roots to grab its water. That is more often how it's going to be happening in the real world out in my garden. And at the end of the day, all of this seed training and seed growing that we do is trying to prepare these seeds for life in the real world. And so if we give them this very sterile, pampered environment where they get sprinkled with water every day, that's just not going to cut it when those first really hot days in June hit and we go a full week without water, for example. So you want to prepare the plants for anything. They can be a little spoiled right here in the very beginning phases. But shortly I'll be putting out another video explaining how to harden off your plants to get them ready for that garden. For now though, I've got quite a few more plants to do, guys. This was Courtney from Ruby Red Farm. Please like and subscribe. We love your support, and I hope you all have a great day. Gentlemen, if you saw my short about buckets and you were offended, please know that it was a joke, and women like our 5-gallon buckets too.